Hello, my name is Mage, and welcome to Black and White Thinking. Or perhaps more appropriately for this video, welcome to the Discord Dome. 2 queers enter, 1 me leaves. Today's video I would like to consider more of a conversation than an essay or a rant. I am hoping that anyone that watches this video is open to the ideas I am going to try to express, just as I will attempt to be open in any responses. I am a mad woman, but I am also super into the idea of queer discussion and openness even when those conversations are hard, and I hope that comes across in this video. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about straight passing privilege, the biphobic and transphobic implications of such a notion, and how I truly think it's time for monosexual queer people, especially sapphics, to start actively involving themselves in the protection of their apparent bisexual siblings. Straight passing privilege is a loaded phrase, with each individual word carrying a fairly heavy punch of its own. Not every multi-word phrase requires a nuanced understanding of each individual word, but this one, straight passing privilege, definitely does. I also want to be sure that we all understand the definitions and consequences of the word we use to other, queer people who don't match up to our personal view of queerness. And because chaos and queer theory are intertwined, I'm going to start in the middle with passing. What is passing? What does it mean to pass as something you're not? And is passing even a thing? Well, the term passing, at least in the context of this video and the general discourse around how queer a person is, refers to the sociological concept that explains the phenomena of a minority person passing, hiding, or assimilating into part of the majority. Now, passing as a theory is real and true and very much a proven reality for a lot of people. When people pass purposely, they are usually doing it in order to afford themselves the safety of being part of the dominant group. For example, a binary trans person years into their transition may not mention their trans identity to new people they meet for fear of segregation or violence, for fear of having to come out again. A binary trans person who hasn't transitioned in any way may pass as their assigned gender at birth, but they identify as a different gender. A light-skinned woman may not mention her black heritage around her white friends in order to avoid alienation or misunderstanding. When autistic people mask, they are essentially trying to pass in a neurotypical society. As it goes, passing is something uncomfortable and often identity-ridding. But it is something many members of minority groups will do, rendering themselves invisible so that no target is put on them instead. And yes, by these social definitions, a definition that lays down the truth of the personal trauma that can be done to a person who passes, bisexual people can obviously pass. Bisexual people will often pass simply because of the outstanding ignorance of those around them, or again, for safety. If people build emotional walls around them when they hurt inside, passing is essentially the wall we build when we know that the hurt can come from external sources. Again, it's pretty hard to abuse what you can't actually see, so when left to choose between invisibility or villainization, a lot of people will choose the former. Passing is a way a lot of people with self-loathing around their identity can deal with it without actually ever having to deal with it. Passing is not a privilege, it's a coping mechanism. But I'll get more into that later. Okay, so straight. I don't really have to explain this one, do I? Heterosexual people be heterosexualing. A straight person is someone who identifies as being attracted to other people who identify as the binary opposite gender of their own. Binary opposites are a debatable thing, but you get what I'm saying. Bisexual people are not straight, they are bisexual. Referring to bisexual people as straight is literally nothing short of a hate crime, and I'm not going to put up with it. Shout out to all the bisexual people out there in different gendered relationships. Privilege. Okay, so more sociology. The concept of privilege, being one of the internet's favourite buzzwords at the moment, is something that really probably doesn't need explaining again, but we're going to remind ourselves. Privilege here being used to refer to the social capital and gains a person gets by being part of the well-off majority. Whilst living under the patriarchy, a man can be seen as holding more privilege than a woman does. Trans people, cis people, queer people, straight people, and yes, even black and white people. Now, privilege doesn't exist as a blanket statement, nor is it something one can really change. It simply refers to the fact that some social groups have more power, money, resources, or rights than another in any given social structure. People cannot change the social groups they are born within, so what one chooses to do with their acknowledged privilege is more of the question. And privilege is something potentially dangerous to identify, in my opinion, without the help of intersectionality. Intersectionality referring to the understanding that people rarely belong to one social group, and that people with intersections in their identity should be acknowledged as such. Within a patriarchal society, men, in many situations, hold a certain power over women, but that privilege will look different on a black gay man than it would on a straight white man, for example. Does a black gay man have more privilege than a straight white woman? In some situations, perhaps yes. In others, perhaps not. Again, there is nothing absolute about privilege except that it does and can exist, and intersectionality allows us space to see people as multifaceted in regards to social group identities. So straight and passing and privilege. We've defined them basically and separately, but let's look at them all together. The phrase straight passing privilege is almost exclusively applied to bi+ identifying people who are in relationships with someone of a different gender. According to the Tower of Babel itself, Twitter, no one else is capable of gaining privilege from the act of straight passing. Straight passing privilege, when thrown around in queer spaces, is usually referring to a bi+ person's ability to pretend to be straight when dating someone heterosexual or both. Their ability to be assumed as heterosexual. In regards to what I said earlier about how passing is a thing that lots of people do, but not just for fun. Well, as I said, bisexual people are included in this. However, all types of people, all types of queer people, can inherently pass. When a gay boy pretends to be straight for his teen mates, that's passing. When a lesbian tells her nagging aunt over dinner she'll be sure to update her when she finally gets a boyfriend, that's passing. When a non-binary bisexual girl doesn't correct someone who calls her relationship with her boyfriend a cishet one, that's passing. Though, again, if you were to ask most scholars on Tumblr, only one of these people could be considered gaining any social capital or approval in this situation. The bisexual person, of course. Now, obviously, I disagree, and I disagree hard, and that's why I'm here. Because straight passing privilege is just, one, not a thing, and two, is so often used as a tool by monosexual queer people to gain some sort of clout over bisexual people, specifically women, in queer spaces. I can't take it seriously until that stops. All of the above examples are examples of passing, but passing isn't a privilege. In these instances, people are being closeted and rendered invisible. They are having to lie about themselves to make other people comfortable. This is not a privilege, rather a sign that a society is not as okay with queer people as Pride Month at Target or Tesco would have you assume. And okay, I've just made two pretty big statements above, so let me try to back them up with the help of some terrible statistics, some Greek myth, and Noam Chomsky. Diving into straight passing privilege isn't a thing first. How could I possibly know that? Well, research, for a start. Lots of it, about a lot of really sad stuff. My own lived experience and a lifetime spent living online in lesbian-only spaces because of agoraphobia, and obviously because my boyfriend told me so. All jokes aside, I did make a list and I have some points. Let's do this. As a concept, straight passing privilege is just inherently heteronormative, cis-sexist, and just plain old misogynistic. The assumption that bisexual people can pass as straight and gain privilege for that not only assumes that bisexual people have an alignment with straight people that other queers don't, but it also disregards how aesthetic assumptions actually work. Bisexual people are often gender non-conforming, and about 50% of bi+ people identify as trans. If you've ever had the pleasure of interacting with bisexual people in real life, then you'll probably notice that most of us don't just look like your average straight person, whatever that looks like. Feminism without intersectionality, queer activism without intersectionality, even on an aesthetic level, especially on an aesthetic level, lacks nuance and rids people of integral parts of their identity. To say that a bisexual person gains privilege when they are assumed straight doesn't make it true. Privilege cannot be found in one moment. What straight passing privilege says is that bisexuality is something that people accept being erased from the social spectrum. That bisexuality, more than any orientation, is always being pushed to the limits of invisibility. One of the simplest reasons bisexual people don't have straight passing privilege is because no queer person has straight passing privilege. It's just called being in the closet. Saying that bisexual people can have straight passing privilege but monosexual queer people can't infers pretty heavily, in my opinion, that bisexual people are somehow less queer. As Juana Rodriguez, professor of gender and women's studies at UC Berkeley, says in her essay Queer Politics, Bisexual Erasure, Sexuality at the Nexus of Race, Gender and Statistics, bisexual and trans-identified people are also frequently disparaged for their ability to pass into legible social categories of privilege, be they heterosexuality or cisgender. Yet all sorts of people pass, try to pass or fail to pass into and out of categories of privilege or marginalization. Moreover, we know that passing as a black man or as a Latina woman rarely comes with social benefits. Instead, the statistical data around bisexuals reveals that passing, or refusing to pass, has dire psychic and material consequences for our ability to thrive physically and/or socially. The nuances of bisexuality are eroded by concepts like straight passing privilege, especially in regard to the statistical analysis that has shown over and over and over again that bisexual people are more likely to stay closeted than lesbians and gay men, whether that be to their partners, or in the workplace, or to their family, or to medical care professionals. To call the closeting of bisexual people a privilege is just, not okay, and definitely biphobic. The effect of closeting on bisexual people is genuinely dangerous, and it's easily connected with the fact that bisexual people suffer higher levels of mental health issues, personality disorder diagnoses, and substance abuse issues than gay men, lesbians, or heterosexuals. Now, before making any assumptions about the subtitle here, please hear me out. Did you know that a study in 2015 found that bisexual people faced discrimination from monosexual queer people just as much as they did heterosexuals? That's messed up, right? Or maybe you're one of those people who's kind of panicking right now because I just dared to compare queer people to their oppressor. Wait, what's this video about again? Oh yeah, not calling bi people straight. So we need to talk about the queer hierarchy, and how ignoring it is not going to make the internal issues between queer people go away. Some things cannot simply be brushed away with the notion that all queer people should just love each other, and anyone who mentions discourse is just encouraging infighting. Infighting is in fact dumb, but I can't love biphobes or transphobes, and more importantly, I struggle to believe bisexual people are truly being loved by other queer people at this point, based on everything I read. One of the big reasons that has to do with all of my anger here is the othering, the abandonment, and the goddamn offering up to the lions that queer people, including bisexual plus women, do to bisexual women that date men. So, very strong content warning for what is ahead. Again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the easiest straight-passing privilege logical fallacies to break, and the example most often used by the entire queer internet to shame bi people dating the opposite gender, is this. A bi woman dating a man can hold hands with her partner in the street and feel safe. A woman dating a woman doesn't. Which, on the surface, might actually convince you that somehow bi people do have some secret special privilege that lesbians and gay men don't have access to. But again, this so clearly infers to me that bisexual people are not the real queers. 2, this is a logical fallacy, like I said, failing to provide context for its argument. 3, this ignores intersectionality and how aesthetic assumptions work, as I covered. I can provide you multiple papers right now, studies on the queer community, that emphatically say that lesbian women are the highest earners in the queer community, that they own houses more often and require less state benefits than other queer people. If we want to talk about the hand-holding privileges bi people have, then we need to start discussing the larger queer issues too. This is mostly a joke about lesbian housing privilege, but I really wish people cared about poor queer people as much as they did whatever the fuck we're talking about today. Bisexual people, especially bisexual trans people, are actually the queer minority most likely to live in poverty, however, so maybe that's why it's not discussed. And yeah, I'm being a little facetious at this point, but mostly because I'm angry, and the more I write about this, the angrier I get. And honestly, the biggest reason for this anger, in regards to straight passing privilege specifically, is that it equates the experience of a bisexual woman in a relationship with a cishet man as comparable to that of a straight woman dating a straight man. And yeah, it isn't. For a long time, research into intimate partner violence and domestic abuse has shown that non-monosexual women are more likely to suffer these kinds of abuse than any monosexual woman ever dating a man. A study in Virginia in 2018 found that while just over 1 in 3 heterosexual women will experience intimate partner violence in her lifetime, 78% of non-monosexual women will. And that non-monosexual women are more likely to experience sexual, emotional, and psychological control, violence, and intimate stalking. The writer adding too that the study confirms non-monosexual women are particularly at risk for sexual identity-based violence at the hands of their male man partners, suggesting bi-negativity and biphobia may indeed be linked to hegemonic masculinity. And whilst it would be lovely to think people actually cared about that, when examining data on how to re-evaluate the American Violence Against Women Act, Lynn Addington of the University of Minnesota found that bisexual victims of IPV are often left out of the data narrative, stating, "As it currently stands, bisexual individuals in these victim groups, especially transgender bisexual individuals, are largely ignored by research and excluded from federal studies." A study in the UK found that bisexual women are less likely than heterosexual women to live alone, but also less likely to live in a couple. However, they are more likely to live with children, which, doing the math, shout out to all my bisexual single mums out there revelling in their straight privilege, I guess. This particular study actually found out a lot of things based in economics, including that bisexuals face higher rates of bullying at school, tend to do worse at school, tend to be poorer, and are generally having a miserable time. It was a pretty horrible read, and it concluded that, taken together, these findings suggest greater likely material disadvantage for bisexual men and women compared to heterosexuals. Their incomes are significantly lower than heterosexuals, yet having children and poor health, when combined with lower incomes and lower housing wealth, all contribute to their greater likelihood of poverty compared to heterosexuals. As Christian Kreese discusses in his essay on bisexual asylum seekers, the lack of stable recognition for bisexual people can literally leave us ripe for murder in countries that have no rights for queer people. Research into asylum case law in many countries, including the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, suggests that bisexuals are at serious risk of having their claims dismissed because their stories and identities are cast as non-plausible or non-consequential. While the discretion requirement, i.e. the expectation that lesbian, gay, bisexual or trans applicants will live discreet lives, or in other words, stay in the closet to prevent persecution, has been successfully challenged in many jurisdictions, bisexuals are still alleged to be able to pass without hassle. Writing this script, this video, has hardly been the most fun, and deciding how I was gonna approach this subject was a big part of it. I would be totally lying right now though if I said that my notes weren't full of names and dates. If I didn't have a big list of biphobes, a lot of celebrities, who have done all the things in this video and who totally deserve to be called out by name. However, whilst making this video, I came to the conclusion that this doesn't need names, and I would rather just zoom in on a certain group of people who, in the nicest way, I think should keep their mouth shut in regards to straight passing privilege. People I come across saying this stuff the most. Lesbians who used bisexuality as a stepping stone, who now feel the need to tell the world all about the straight privilege they felt they had when they dated men. Lesbians that have often had a particular panache for internalised biphobia when they did identify as bisexual, who accidentally admit their biphobia was not so internalised the moment they come out a second time. These people are lesbians, and according to them they always were, so they don't actually have a right to speak on the bisexual experience. They don't know what it's like to be bisexual, even if they said they were for a while. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I think a lot of this bears out of the confusion all people, not just lesbians, have when it comes to this scenario. Being able to walk down the street, being a woman holding a man's hand, or being a man holding a woman's hand, is not straight passing privilege, it's male privilege. Straight passing privilege instantly disappears for any woman, straight, gay, or bi, when she's walking home alone at night. Recently, a woman walking home in London, whilst wearing bright clothes and on the phone to her boyfriend, was snatched off the street and murdered by a police officer. Was she bi? We'll never know, she's dead. But straight passing privilege doesn't mean shit if your boyfriend isn't there to protect you, apparently. Misogyny is the basis for why bisexual women are often tarnished as having straight passing privilege by other queer people. Bisexual people as a whole are still seen as traitors to the queer cause, even though one of us invented that damn stupid march we keep getting told we don't belong at. Any violence we suffer is either regarded as a consequence of our gayness or our straightness, or it is blatantly ignored because bisexuality is both hypersexualized and therefore dehumanized, as well as being the invisible sexuality, void of culture, ripped of history, and disregarded as childish fantasy or mental illness. Sometimes I worry about the risk of pathologizing queerness when I warp it with theory and not just simple human experiences. However, I think there is also a fairly basic philosophical misunderstanding going on in the queer community right now about what it means to be bisexual. A lot of this is about identity and othering. One queer person othering another in order to make themselves feel comfortable in a cis-het world. There is a level of bisexuality being treated like an antimony by other queer people. The question always being posed, how can you be both straight and gay when we aren't? We're bisexual. Instead of people treating our identity like a paradox, bisexuality has to be treated as a unique experience of its own, that whilst intersecting with other elements of queer or binary defined culture, is its own thing worthy of acknowledgement. Trying to force order where chaos exists is a tale as old as time itself, and it does nothing but alienate people you seek to protect. To understand bisexuality as a fluctuation between straight and gay implies that bisexuality is unstable, where monosexual identities are stable. The great Ouroboros, the snake that eats itself, we're all Hollands making up a hierarchy. And I guess sometimes it feels like the largest pathologizing of bisexuality comes from those of us that aren't bisexual. The thought experiment known as the ship of Theseus gathered together by dead old men, first proposed by Plutarch, definitely first thought of by ancient philosophers in Asia, essentially presents this notion, Plutarch's words, to its subjects. The ship wherein Theseus and the youth of Athens returned from Crete has 30 oars, and was preserved by the Athenians for generations, for they took away the old planks as they decayed, putting in new and stronger timber in their places, insomuch that the ship became a standing example among the philosophers for the logical question of the things that grow, one side holding that the ship remained the same, and the other contending that it was no longer the same. Which, very, very simply translated into a thought experiment, posits the notion: if we take away the parts of an object that make up its identity, is it still the same object? If we use those old parts and build a new object, which object holds the original identity? Are either of them the original object? And something about this stupid thought experiment, heavily referenced by the type of people that took minor philosophy, self-call out there, feels relevant to the notion of straight passing privilege to me and how we see bisexuality and its interactions with queerness. If we remove all the parts of a woman that society thinks makes her queer, is she still queer, even if she says she is? Does she deserve to see herself as such when she proudly walks down the road holding hands with a cishet man? Noam Chomsky, no introductions needed there hopefully, has stated that in regards to cognitive science, the ship of Theseus tells us more about the human mind than the identity of the questioned object. That this experiment allows us to see the failures of externalism and how people often believe what is true for them must be true for someone else. When we ask, is a bi person in a straight relationship still bi, or does their assimilation come with privilege, we don't really learn anything about the subject. We learn far more about ourselves and what we think as individual social actors, about the notions of queerness, of bisexuality, of the pieces that we think make someone queer enough in our eyes. In her essay discussing bisexual passing, Jessica Lingle of UPenn quotes two bisexual women giving their thoughts on the subject of straight passing privilege. The process of public performance can become less rather than more comfortable over time. Sharon Storm, who wrote that with each passing year in this straight relationship, I seem to be losing a bit more of my public bisexual identity. The change was a not so subtle political message that you're just no longer one of us, a banishment of sorts. I played along in public, but internally I was more bi than ever. And again, bisexuals are perhaps particularly well positioned to understand the range of judgments that can be potentially levelled at gay and straight displays of love, as described by Lisa Ost in 1991. With my women lovers, I'd always been called a lezzy and a dyke. I'd forgotten what looks you still got when you were with men. I had imagined I might feel safe and accepted. Wrong. I felt measured, as if the women were checking out their interest in the guy I was with and their ability to obtain him. Similarly, the men were gouging their attraction to me and competence to beat my boyfriend in a drag race or some other primitive competition. By the way, this is a really good paper, you should go and read it, and it discusses the ramifications and reasons bisexual people pass really well without ever framing it within the scope of privilege. Bisexuality will always threaten a society that is rooted in the upholding of monosexist values and monogamous culture. A woman will never truly be free under patriarchy or black Americans in a country founded on the West African slave trade. For there to be an us, there must always be a them. For bisexuals, we are in the unique position of being them to both straight people and gay men and lesbians. That's not a privilege, it's erasure. And perhaps the conversation on straight passing privilege and hand-holding rights might one day be the peak of queer theory and conversation. However, right now, we have bigger things to worry about. And one of those things is the brutalization of the bisexual in cultures worldwide. I will be more willing to discuss the ramifications of straight passing privilege in the future when bisexual asylum seekers aren't being put at risk by the concept. People admitted that bisexual men actually existed and chose to honour and protect them. If bi women who date men didn't suffer the highest rates of IPV or poverty for them and their children. I'll be more open to discuss it where bi women who date men in the public eye don't end up demonised, groomed, abused and offered up as a sacrifice for media witch hunts. Until that changes, straight passing privilege is nothing but a dog